Hi guys, today we're going to be making these mittens here. They were super easy and very fast to work up, and I think they turned out really nice. So you can definitely just use the pattern. I tell you exactly how many rows and all that kind of thing that I made for them to fit my hand, but I do tell you in the video how to customize it to your own size. So you can definitely make it a little bit different if your hands are smaller or bigger than mine. But otherwise, I'll get these out of the way here. And for this mitten, I will insert a picture right now just because I don't have any left of the yarn that I used. I'll insert it now and write a little bit of information about it on screen. But on top of that, for the size of hook, I actually used a smaller hook for the cuff than I did for the main portion of the mitten. I just thought it would look a little bit neater, and I like it super snug around my wrist. I do mention that in the video, but for the cuff I used a 5mm crochet hook, and for the main part of the mitten I used a 5.5mm crochet hook. But you definitely don't have to do that. You can use one size for the entire mitten. You're also going to need a yarn needle to sew in your ends, a stitch marker because we do work in the round for the main portion of the mitten, and a pair of scissors. And I think that's everything, and with that we'll just get right into making these super easy mittens. So we're going to start with the cuff of the mitten. So I'll start with a slip knot on my 5mm crochet hook. And I'll just pull that tight and we can begin. So I'm going to start with a chain of 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And this is actually going to be how wide the cuff ends up being. So if you'd like it to sit a little bit wider on your wrist, go ahead and chain up a little bit more. This chain amount doesn't matter. So I started with a chain of 10, and from here I'm going to single crochet into the second chain from the hook. So remember that loop on your hook doesn't count as anything. We count back 1 and 2, and into that second chain we're going to put a single crochet. And I'm just going to work my way down the length of the chain, putting one single crochet into every single chain. And I'll just finish up these single crochets on camera because I'm just about at the end already. And we can go on to round 2 together. So I'm just going to put my single crochet into that final chain. And from here, I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and for row 2, I'm going to single crochet into every stitch across. But instead of going into the stitch like normal, typically we would go through that stitch, having both those loops on top of your hook, I'm just going to go into the back loop only. So there's the front loop going in to that back loop only. So it's just the one loop on your hook, and then you complete your single crochet like normal. Again, into that second stitch, back loop only, and complete your single crochet. And I'm just going to work my way across row 2 with single crochets in that back loop only for the entirety of row 2. And when I make my way to this end here, I'll come back on and we'll go on to the next step together. All right, I'm just at that final stitch of row 2. That chain from the row before did not count as a stitch that we skipped, so it's just going to be that last obvious stitch is the last stitch of row 2. So again, I'll just go right into that back loop with a single crochet. And I'm going to do 25 rows total. So I just completed row 2, so I'll do 23 more rows of exactly what we just did for row 2. So I finished that last single crochet in the back loop only. I chained 1. I'm going to turn my work and work my way across again, putting a single crochet into that back loop only. And when I make it to the end, I'll complete that final single crochet. I'll chain 1, turn my work, and repeat. So as soon as I have 25 rows total of that, I will come back on and we'll go on to working up the main portion of the mitten together. All right, I'm just completing my final stitch of row 25. And to know that 25 rows was good for me, what I did, I'll just take out my hook there, is give the cuff a good stretch, and don't worry about ruining it or anything. The reason that we single crocheted in the back loop only is to make this cuff stretchy, so you won't ruin it by doing this. Give it a good stretch, and when I hold it around my wrist, the two ends end up meeting with each other like so. And I'm not pulling it or anything, it just sits nicely like that. Now, if you work up your piece and the endings are, you know, overlapping just a little bit or anything like that, that's completely fine. I do like my cuff to sit quite snug on my wrist because it will stretch out a little bit over time. So even with it like this, it will feel quite snug around your wrist when you wear it. So if it's a little bit overlapping, that's completely fine. If it overlaps by quite a bit, because I do crochet quite tight, you can go ahead and pull out 5 rows and just make it 20 rows. But again, when the mitten is complete, this will feel a little snugger around your wrist, and that's how I like it. But it's completely up to you, as long as this is a multiple of 5, the number of rows that you do. So at this point, I'm going to insert my hook again. I will chain 1, and we're going to slip stitch the 2 ends of the cuff together. So if we just fold it up in half like so, and I'll turn my work here, and we're going to slip stitch these stitches along this side of the cuff to these stitches over here on this side of the cuff, and there should be the same number on each side. So to slip stitch, we go right into that very first stitch on this side over here, and then we go into the first stitch over on this side. And you grab the yarn and pull it through both of those stitches, and then pull that loop through the loop that's already on your hook. And you just slip stitch those first 2 stitches together. And again, we'll go into that next stitch on this side, going through both of those loops. And then we'll go over to the other side, go into the next stitch on that side, like so, pull the yarn through both of those stitches and pull that loop through the loop that's on your hook. And that's a slip stitch. And it should work out that you have the same number of slip stitches here. So what I mean by that is when you get down to this end, the final stitch on this side, it should be that you're slip stitching it to the final stitch on that side. And if that's not the case, unfortunately, somewhere along the line, something got a little bit messed up. You might have skipped a stitch when you were slip stitching, or maybe when you were working up the cuff you ended up accidentally skipping a side stitch, which would mean you'd have less stitches on half your cuff. So you got to look back and see where something ended up a little bit wonky, because it should end up that you have 9 slip stitches here if you started with that chain of 10 like I did. So one more time, I'll go into that next stitch over on this side and the next stitch on the back side and slip stitch. And I'm going to work my way down here, slip stitching each stitch together. And when I've worked my way across, I will come back on. All right, I'm just at my final stitch here. So make sure you're not missing that final one. It can kind of get a little bit tucked. So I'll go through that one and the final stitch over on that side. And that completes my 9 slip stitches. And from here, I'm actually going to chain 1 and cut my yarn and fasten off. And the reason I'm doing that is because we have to turn this cuff right side out. You want the seam to end up being on the inside of the cuff. And so I'm actually going to cut my yarn here and fasten off. I'll pull that tight. And I'm going to turn this cuff right side out, like so. So at this point, I'm going to bring in my 5.5 millimeter crochet hook, and this is where we just fastened off. So I have that at the top here, and I'm going to attach my yarn just to that space to the left of where we fastened off here, like so. And I'm actually going to work over this tail as I go, so I'll just put that over my hook, and we're going to bring in our yarn again, and I'm going to attach it into that space. So I'll pull up a loop, and I will chain 1. And I'm going to go back into that same space that I just attached my yarn with a single crochet. And at this point, we're going to work around the entire edge of the cuff with a round of single crochets, just kind of evenly spacing them around. Because we have 25 rows in the cuff here, we want to make sure to have 25 single crochets all the way around. And it's not going to be easy to see where your hook goes here, just because there's not specific stitches along this edge to go into, but you can just kind of place your hook wherever it'll fit at the end of each row and place a single crochet. So there's my second one, and then I move on to the next row, placing a single crochet at the top of that row. And once again, I'm working over these tails as I go, so I don't have to sew them in later. So just work your way around, evenly spacing a single crochet at the top of each row, all the way around until you get back here, and just make sure you have 25 single crochets. And once I've made my way all the way around, I'll come back on and we will go on to the next step together. All right, I just made my way around with my 25 single crochets, and I went ahead and counted them just to make sure it is in fact 25. So at this point, we're not going to slip stitch to that first single crochet. We're actually going to be working in the round here for the remainder of the mitten. So we'll bring in our stitch marker, and I'm going to double crochet right into that first single crochet of round 1. So I'll just go right into it with a double crochet. And I'm going to go ahead and mark that stitch as the first stitch of round 2. So I just did 1 double crochet and I want to do 4 in a row, so I'll do 3 more in a row here. So just 1 double crochet into the next stitch, 1 double crochet into the next stitch, and 1 double crochet into the next stitch. So I have 4 double crochets in a row, and into that next stitch we're going to do an increase. So to do an increase, you go into that same stitch with 2 double crochets. So there's 1 and 2. And again, I'm going to put 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 double crochets in a row. And the next stitch will be an increase stitch. So we put 2 double crochets into the same stitch. 1 and 2. And that's going to be the pattern for this entire round. We put a double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the next stitch we'll get 2 double crochets into the same stitch. 1 and 2. So I'm just going to keep working this pattern around. Okay, I'm just at the end of round 2 here. I just did my 4 double crochets in a row, and it works out that my final stitch before the stitch marker is an increase stitch. So there'll be 2 double crochets into that stitch. And if you work your way around and that last stitch is not a increase stitch, unfortunately somewhere around the row something got a little bit messed up, so just look around here and make sure that there's 4 double crochets in between those increase stitches, because it should be that final stitch is the increase stitch. So for the next 4 rounds it's just going to be 1 double crochet into each stitch. So we'll remove that stitch marker and go right back into that stitch you just removed the marker from, and put your first double crochet of this round into it, and we'll remark that stitch. And I'm just going to work my way around with 1 double crochet into every stitch around. And when you make your way back, when you make your way around and you're back at this side, you'll just remove the stitch marker, put your next double crochet into the top of that stitch you just removed the marker from, and you'll start round 4. So work up round 3, that's what I'm on right now, round 4, round 5, and round 6 with 1 double crochet into each stitch around. All right, I just completed my 4 rounds of just 1 double crochet into every stitch. And if I put this on at this point, it just kind of nicely sits on my wrist and just goes to kind of the bottom of my thumb here, or just right below it. If yours is very, very different, you can either add an additional round of just 1 double crochet into every stitch, or take a round out, whatever works best for you. But even if it's a little bit different, that's completely fine. You just might end up a little bit, you know, lower on your wrist or higher up or whatever. But for me, that's where it's sitting at this point. So for round 7 here, It's basically the same as we've been doing, where it's 1 double crochet into each stitch around. But when I get to my final 4 stitches of round 7, I'm going to stop and come back on because we're doing something a little bit different at the end of round 7. So again, I just marked my first stitch, and I'm going to just work around with 1 double crochet into every stitch. And when I've made it to my final 4 stitches of this round, I'll come back on and I'll show you the next step. All right, I'm coming to the end of round 7 here. I have 4 stitches remaining before that stitch marker. So at this point, we're going to loosely chain 4, and this is to make a thumb hole. So not doing it too tight, we're going to chain 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then I'm just going to remove that stitch marker, and I'm going to skip those final 4 stitches. So skip, 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 and into that stitch you just removed the marker from, we're just going to double crochet like normal to start round 8. And once again, I will mark that stitch as the first of round 8. And for round 8, we're just going to double crochet around, and when I make it to that chain we just made, I'll come back on and show you what to do over that chain space. But otherwise, it's just working around with double crochets until you reach it. So I just have a couple more stitches here until I reach that chain. So I'll double crochet in the stitch right before the chain. And what we're going to do over this chain 4 is we're still going to do 4 double crochets, but we're going to work right through that chain. And I'm going to try to just grab the top loop of the chain. And the reason I'm doing this is just because when we work up our thumb, it will be a little bit easier because we'll eventually be working in the bottom side of this chain. So it's not crucial that you only catch that top loop. As long as you're working 4 double crochets into each of those 4 chains, that will be completely fine. Work my way across this chain with 4 double crochets, 1 in each chain. So there's 3, and the final one is 4. Like so. So you have 4 double crochets over those 4 chains. And again, as long as you're working through that V, whether you end up with the 1 or 2 loops on your hook is completely fine. As long as you have a hook underneath, or sorry, a loop underneath that we can work through when we're working up our thumb. So, going to remove that stitch marker, and I will put my first double crochet of round 9 into it, and I will remark it. And the next 3 rounds are once again just rounds of 1 double crochet into every stitch, and so that's round 9, 10, and 11 is what I'm going to work up now. Just 1 double crochet into every stitch, and that gets me to where the glove will sit kind of right at the start of my fingers, but I will show you in just a second where it's sitting, just in case you need to add an additional round of double crochet or do 1 round less. whatever works for you. But I will show you in just a second where it's sitting on me. So I'll see you at the end of round 11. Right, I'm just coming to the end of round 11, and if I put my mitten on at this point, I'll show you where it goes up to. It's kind of just right at the start of my fingers. So I've gone completely over my knuckles here, and it's kind of a little bit right over the start of my fingers. So if you need to do another row here to get up to the start of your fingers, or if you want to do one less row because it ended up too high, that's completely fine. Just get it right to just over the start of your fingers. So for round 12, we're going to do a decrease row. So to do that, we will double crochet into that first stitch of round 12, put our stitch marker back in, and we're going to do 4 double crochets in a row prior to the decrease. So there was my first one. I'll do 3 more. 2, 3, and 4. That's 4 double crochets in a row. And then we're going to do a decrease. So to decrease, we yarn over, go into that next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. You have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops, and then we yarn over, we go into the very next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and we yarn over and pull through those first 2 loops on our hook, and yarn over and pull through all 3 of the remaining loops on your hook. So we just took those next 2 stitches and made it into 1 stitch. So again, we'll do a double crochet over the next 4 stitches, just 1 into each of those next 4 stitches. There's 2, whoops, 3, and 4. And again, we will do a double crochet decrease over the next 2 stitches. So yarn over, go into that next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, go into the next stitch, and pull up a loop. You have 4 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, and yarn over and pull through those remaining 3 loops. So we just did another decrease, and that's the pattern for this round. 1 double crochet over the next 4 stitches. So there is 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we decrease over the next 2 stitches. And I'm just going to go ahead and repeat that pattern all the way around. And once again, when I make it back to my stitch marker, I will come back on. All right, just coming to the end of round 12, and I have 2 stitches remaining, and it works out that I'm going to be double crocheting or decreasing over these final 2 stitches. So once again, I know I did that round correctly. So at this point, for round 13 to 17, it's just going to be rounds of double crochets. And I will show you in the next clip where that goes up to on me, but it should go kind of right to the end of your fingertips. But again, I'll just show that in just a second, but I'm going to go ahead and work up rounds and rounds of double crochets for round 13 through to 17. And once I have round 17 completed, I will come back on and we're just about ready to, we will be just about ready to close up the top of our glove and move on to the thumb hole. So I just completed round 17 and I'll put that on just so you can see where it goes on me. So you can see it just reaches the end of my fingers. I don't want it completely going over my fingers because we are going to do 2 more rounds. So it just kind of just about hits the tip of my middle finger, but it's covering all of those other fingers. So at this point, we're going to do 2 more rounds, and they're both going to be decrease rounds. So to start on round 18, or whatever round you're on, because remember, to get it to the end of the fingers, you can just do another round of double crochets, or you can do less rounds, whatever gets you right to the end of your fingertips. So I'll take out the stitch marker here, and I'm going to double crochet decrease over 2 stitches all the way around until I get to my final 3 stitches. So I'll double crochet decrease over those first 2 stitches. So remember, it's yarn over, go into that first stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, go into that next double crochet and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops on your hook, and yarn over and pull through those final 3 loops on your hook. And once again, I will mark that stitch as the first stitch of round 18, and I'm just going to work my way around doing that same thing until I have 3 stitches remaining. So I'll double crochet decrease over the next 2 stitches again, and I'm just going to keep working my way around doing that double crochet decrease over the next 2, and the next 2. And once I have 3 stitches remaining in this round, I'll come back on and show you what to do at that point. All right, I have 3 stitches remaining before I'm at my stitch marker. So I'm going to double crochet 3 together over those final 3 stitches. So to do that, we're going to yarn over, go into that first of the final 3 stitches and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through those first 2 loops, yarn over, go into that second stitch and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops on your hook, and once again we will yarn over and go into that final stitch of the 3 right before your stitch marker, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops on your hook. You have 4 loops remaining on your hook, yarn over and pull through all 4 of those loops, and that's going to complete round 18. So for the final round, we're going to double crochet 3 together all the way around. So that's what we just did on those final 3 stitches. We're going to do that all the way around. So again, we yarn over, go into this first stitch of round 19, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over, go into that second stitch or the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over and go through the third stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through those first 2 loops. You have 4 loops remaining, yarn over and pull through all 4 of those loops. And once again, I will mark that stitch just so we know when we've made our way all the way around. And that's what we're going to do all the way around, and it should work out that you'll have 3 stitches remaining in this round to do the final double crochet 3 together. So it will work out perfectly. Once again, we yarn over, make sure you're going in the next available stitch and not the one that the stitches are coming out of. Go into that stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over into that next available stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, and yarn over and go into that 3rd stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through those first 2 loops. When you have 4 loops on your hook, you yarn over and pull through all 4. So I'm going to work my way around doing that. All right, I have 3 stitches remaining, and you're actually going to end up with 4 double crochet 3 togethers at the end of this round once we complete this one as well. So I'll just do my final one over these final 3 stitches, and it's definitely getting a little snug at this point. You kind of have to wiggle everything around and keep working or moving your work. There we go, 4 loops on my hook, and there's the final one complete. So at this point, I'm going to remove my stitch marker from that first stitch of the final round, and I'm going to slip stitch right into it. So once again, you kind of have to wiggle everything to get it in the right spot. Go into that first stitch of the final round. Oops, there we go. And we're going to slip stitch right into it, like so. And then we're going to chain 1, and I'm going to cut my yarn, leaving a pretty decent tail because we're going to weave it through those stitches to close up the final gap. So I'll pull my yarn right through just to fasten off. And then you can bring in your yarn needle, or else you can just use your hook to do this, to weave it in it and out and grabbing it on each side, but I'm going to use my yarn needle. So we'll get the yarn needle attached here, like so. And all you're going to do is weave it through these end stitches, and this part can be a little bit tricky. It's hard to see the end stitches, but just kind of do your best. So I'll just kind of weave it, oops, through those ending stitches. So I came from the inside out, and on the next stitch I'll go from the outside in. And again, it's tricky to see where the stitches are, but it doesn't even need to go into the top of the stitches, just at the ending here. So I'll weave from the outside in, and then on the next one I'm going to go from the inside out. And remember, we had 4, so I'll do that one more time. So I'll go on to the next one and go from the outside in. So we're just weaving it in and out of those final stitches, but once again, where you go through isn't too important. Just make sure it's right close to the end. I'll do this final one, and if you pull your yarn at this point, it should close up that final little gap at the end. And you can use your tail, see everything is closed up there, you can use your tail to kind of sew in any remaining spaces you'd like to get rid of. So I'm just going to work my way around the top here, sewing in that end. And once I've made my way around a couple times, we'll be able to cut our yarn and fasten off, and the main portion of the mitten is complete. So just kind of working my way back and forth, closing up any weird gaps that I'd like to get rid of, and at this point I will cut my yarn, and that's all sewn in. You can do a knot at this point, it's up to you, but I think it's pretty good in there. And there we go. The main part of our mitten is all complete. So next up, we're gonna work on our thumb hole. So at this point, we're gonna work on our thumb. So I have my yarn here, and I kind of moved it so that hole was just sitting in the center, but whatever is easiest for you to work on. I just found it a little bit easier to be looking right at this hole. So we're going to attach our yarn to, remember when we skipped those 4 stitches, we did the chain and then skipped, there should be 4 stitches along the bottom there that are unworked. So you can see this stitch has the double crochet going out of it, so we're not going to go into this one. We're going to go into that first one on the right that is unworked, and we're going to attach our yarn. However you like to attach it is fine. I just pull it through, and then we are going to chain 1, and I'm actually going to work over that tail so I don't need to sew it in later. And we're going to go right back into that stitch that you just attached your yarn to with a double crochet. And then we're going to double crochet into the next 3 stitches. So we'll have all 4 of those that we skipped worked into. So I just did my first one. Here's the second one. Third. Again, I'm working over that tail just so I don't have to sew it in later. And 4. So we have 4 double crochets in a row. And the next stitch should have a double crochet coming out of it. So we're not going to go into that one. It's just the 4 in the row. And then to get to those top stitches up here that we're going to work around, we're going to double crochet 3 together. And what this is going to do is just close up. If we just jump to the stitches up there and started working around them, you'd have a big space on the side. So this will help there not be a big gap. So to double crochet 3 together, again, there's not a specific stitch we're going to go into. We're just going to kind of work into the sides of these stitches. So I'll yarn over, go into that first space there. It's the space that has the double crochet coming out of it. Pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through those first 2 loops. And then I'm just going to kind of turn my work, and we'll go right into the side of the double crochet. So again, I'm going to yarn over, go right into the side of this double crochet, just kind of wiggle your hook through it wherever it'll fit, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through those first 2 loops, and then we're going to do one more. So I'm going to go into this final space here, which will kind of catch those 2 loops. So yarn over, go into that final space, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, and yarn over and pull through those final 4 loops. So we just did a double crochet 3 together over the side here. So that brought us right up to, remember when we worked into that chain here, and I said it would be easier if you just worked into that top loop, but I did mention working through the chain, however it worked best was fine. So just kind of wherever your hook is gonna fit, I have these loops available to work into. We're going to do, remember we had 4 chains there, so we're going to do 4 double crochets over these 4 chains. So here's 1 in the first chain, 2, and again I'm catching 2 loops because I had 2, I only double crocheted into that top loop when I was working over the chain, so I have 2 loops to catch now, but you might just have 1 and that's fine. There's 3. This part does not need to be perfect, just kind of wherever your hook will fit, make sure you have 4 along the top here. And here's 4. And that will bring us right over to this side where we're going to do another double crochet 3 together, which will bring us right back to that first double crochet we made of the round. So again, to double crochet 3 together, I'll just kind of wherever my hook will fit, I'll go into that first space, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops on my hook, and then I'm going to go right into the side. You could just kind of go right around it, but I like to avoid any gaps as much as possible, so I am going to go right into the side here. I'll just kind of wiggle my hook until it gets through, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, and we're going to go into this final space here, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, first 2 loops, sorry, and then yarn over and pull through all 4 of those loops. And we're right back to where we started. So once again, we're going to be working in the round. So make sure to be marking your stitches. If I can find my stitch marker, here it is. So for rounds 2 through to 5 for me, and again I'll show you once I've worked up to the end of row 5 where that's sitting on my thumb, but it is going to be round 2, 3, 4, and 5. So 4 rounds of just 1 double crochet into every stitch. So I'm going to go into that first double crochet we made of this round with my first double crochet of round 2. And I will mark it. Insert my hook again, and you should have 10 double crochets around. Remember, we had the 4 on the bottom, 4 on the top, and then we did the 2 double crochet 3 togethers on the side there. So for a total of 10, and it's just going to be working your way around and around the thumb with 1 double crochet into every stitch. So I'm on round 2 now, and when I finish up round 5, I'll come back on and I'll show you where that's sitting on my thumb, and we'll close up the thumb together. All right, I'm just at the end of round 5 here. Just finished up my last stitch before the stitch marker, and I'll show you where that goes to. So it just kind of goes right to the end of my thumb. Again, I don't want it too far over just because we're going to be doing one more round where we're going to close up this end. So it just kind of goes right to the end of my thumb. You can just see the very end of it poking out. So if you have to do more or less, go ahead and do that, but that's what works for me. So I'll take this off, and we're just going to do one more round of decreases. So I will take out that stitch marker, and it's just going to be double crochet 2 togethers all the way around. So it's just decreasing over 2 stitches, not 3 stitches. So we'll yarn over, go into that stitch we just removed our marker from, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, go into the next available stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and yarn over and pull through those final 3 loops. And once again, I will mark that stitch. And you should end up with 5 stitches at the end of this round because we're starting with 10. So again, I'm just going to work my way around, decreasing over 2 stitches at a time until I make my way back to that stitch marker. And I'll just stay on at this point because I just have a couple more to go. I'm on my third one. And 4. And I'll do the final one. So you should have 2 stitches left right at the end there before the stitch marker. So I'll decrease through those final 2 stitches. So at this point, once I'm back to my stitch marker, I'm going to remove the stitch marker and we're going to slip stitch into that stitch that you just removed the marker from to close up the round, and I'll chain 1, and once again I'm going to cut my yarn but leaving a bit of length because we're going to do the same thing of weaving it in and out of those stitches just like we did on the top of the mitten. So I will get my yarn into the needle here. So we have our needle attached here to the yarn, and we're just going to once again weave in and out of those final 5 stitches. So I'm just going to go from the front to the back of that stitch that we just slip stitched to and pull it through, and then I'll go to the next stitch coming from the outside to the inside, pull it through, and the next one from the inside to the outside. Oops. Pull through, and the next one from the outside to the inside, and that final one from the inside to the outside. Pull through, and then if you just give that end a tug, it should close up that end nicely. And once again, I'm just going to go ahead and sew this yarn tail just kind of right around, not doing anything specific here. Just sewing it nicely around the end of this thumb to hide the tail. So once I have that all done, I'll come back on and we will just be cleaning up this bottom edge, and then our mitten is all done. So at this point, just go ahead and try on your mitten, and if the cuff is feeling a little too snug, you can use your 5.5 millimeter crochet hook to clean up this edge. For me, once again, I like it very snug around here, so I'm going to go ahead and use my 5 millimeter crochet hook, but either is completely fine. So I'll get that back off, and we're just going to turn our mitten. So we're looking at the seam here. This was that original seam, and once again I'm going to attach my yarn to the left of that seam, and we're going to do a round of single crochets evenly around this edge. And again, just like before, because we have 25 rows, it should end up being that we have 25 single crochets around here. So I just chained 1, I'm going to single crochet back into that stitch that I just attached the yarn to, and I'm just going to work my way around with 1 single crochet at the end of each row around. This part does not need to be perfect, just kind of wherever your hook will fit. Add a single crochet, and you can just plan to have 1 at the end of each row, so you have 25 around. So when I've made my way around with the single crochets, I will come back on and we'll look at our glove together. All right, I have my 25 single crochets around, and once again I counted them just to be sure that it was 25. I'm going to slip stitch to that first single crochet of the round, and I will chain one, cut my yarn, and pull that yarn through to fasten off. And at this point it's just a matter of getting all of your tails sewn in, which I'm going to go ahead and do right now. Alright, I got all my ends sewn in on my mitten, and I brought in my other one here. So I hope you're happy with how yours turned out and they fit okay and everything like that. I think they turned out super nice. So I hope you're happy with yours. And if you would take a moment to like and subscribe, it would be greatly appreciated. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.